And the other big media yarn this week, speaking of that, is the nation's largest circulation daily, Melbourne's Herald Sun online offering, going behind a paywall next week. Here's the paper's editor-in-chief, Phil Gardner, talking about that.
It's not like the whole Herald Sun's going behind a paywall. Parts of the Herald Sun will be available only to subscribers. It's part of a strategy that media companies right across the world are grappling with. How do they get people to pay for the content on their websites? Yes, it's part of an overall News Corp strategy, absolutely, but we've been tasked with the job of making it work here. We're the biggest daily newspaper in the country. We have a long, proud tradition in Victoria with our readers. Our website has made enormous gains in terms of UB growth over the last 3 or 4 years. So it's logical that we begin in a place like Melbourne.
I bet you the Herald Sun wouldn't be doing this unless they'd been told to.
Oh, look, there's definitely an objective to make more money. You know, there's no doubt about that. The carrying value of the mastheads on the balance sheets of print media companies around the world have been decimated. And the only way you can justify them is increasing your return on equity. So this is an attempt to do that. But when you've started offering people something for free, getting them to pay up for it is a lot more difficult than bringing in a price cut. You know, what the press industry is experiencing now is exactly the same as what the retail industry is experiencing in the face of this online threat.
It's actually far worse. I mean,
yeah,
the retail industry's seen their revenue off 5%. You know, the print media is off 45%, and it's falling 5%, another 5% every year. And in the States, well, I think it's something like 1,400 daily newspapers have shut their doors. Yeah, exactly. So they either start charging for content or they shut their doors. There's no option.
And
here.
It's interesting, of course, because Murdoch does have he can bankroll an experiment like this, whereas I don't think Fairfax would really have the...
You have to be careful about that, because that's through the altruism of banks and shareholders that allows that to happen. If you continue to pay too much for acquisitions, which arguably Fairfax have done in the past, then you end up with a return on equity that's less than what you can get in the bank. The auditors come in and they say, look, the carrying value of this intangible goodwill on your balance sheet is unjustified based on the performance of the business. They end up having to write it off.
But the trouble is, when you go behind a paywall, whether it's partial or what, you sacrifice some level of advertising revenue, because obviously your
readership goes down.
Your readership goes down.
Short term you do, but what happens is that you then are able to quantify who your readers are, and you can quadruple or quintuple what you actually charge for the ad. So first year you suffer a hit. But in the second year and the third year, I mean, Rupert Murdoch's seen this with the Wall Street Journal. That, you know, they went and started charging 5 or 6 years ago, and it's now making serious money for them. So he knows what he's got to do. It's just painful in the short term.
I wonder whether or not there's a bigger theme as well and a bigger threat, and that is the generational change. You know, the number of people actually reading newspapers amongst the younger audience, Generation Y, there's a lot fewer of them. They tend to read the free newspapers, and that's a completely different model. You jump on the train and they hand you one of those free newspapers and they're filled with rubbish, of course, but or advertisements for properties.
But if you look
that model works.
Yeah, but if you look at viewing time, you know, people under the age of 30 these days spend 70 to 80% of their media time on a desktop computer or a pad.
Yes.
You know, and that's where the reading time is. And unless you're actually dishing up a product tailored to that, you don't have a future in the media business.
Yeah, I agree with that.